a very real and potential threat to those that are working hard every day to keep us safe.
We're back with Daniel Ellsberg, and joining us, Peter Bergen, CNN national security analyst, best-selling author. His books include The Osama bin Laden I Know, and Michael Hastings, contributing editor of Rolling Stone. His article, The Runaway General, led to the ouster of General Stanley McChrystal as commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. We'll have Daniel Ellsberg make the point he was going to make in a moment, but first, Peter Bergen, what do you make of all of this?
I think there's been a lot of hype about all of this. If you think about 92,000 so-called secret documents in which there is almost no new information, I think that, do the thought experiment, Larry, where these are all unclassified documents. It's merely because the word secret has been put around them that there's all this excitement. But there's only really one item that's really new, which is the Taliban using heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles. But the other big story, the Taliban has been supported by Pakistani's military intelligence service. Well, that story's been true since 1994. What's really the headline in that? So, to me, this is sort of a storm in a teacup, mostly. I mean, it's interesting. There are interesting details, but there's nothing really new. To compare this to the Pentagon Papers, that was seismic, Larry, because there was a huge disconnect between what the American government was saying officially and what they were saying internally. Here in the Afghan war, all sorts of American government officials saying the war not going very well. No one's disagreeing with that.
Michael, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the question is, in terms of the national security issue, in the long term, what's worse for national security, WikiLeaks or bad U.S. policy? And I think the answer is bad U.S. policy. And in so much as this WikiLeaks disclosure sparks debate about some of the obvious flaws in our Afghan policy, I think that's a positive development.
All right, Daniel Ellsberg, you were going to say at the end of the last segment you wanted to tack on to what
well, let me, if I could follow on from,
yeah.
Let me rather follow on to what Peter Bergen said for a moment there. The Pentagon Papers actually did reveal a number of things, but one of the major lessons of that, I think, is very comparable to what we're hearing, what we're seeing in the reports that have come out so far, what we're going to see, and that is what was not in those 7,000 pages of top secret documents, high-level decision-making estimates. What there was not was a good reason for being in Vietnam or for escalating or for continuing the war or for any reason to believe that we'd do better in the future than we'd been doing for the past 23 years. I suspect from what we've seen so far and the correspondence of that with leaks from General Eikenberry, the ambassador there, whose secret cables were leaked in January and revealed that his vision was pretty much what these papers are showing for the last 6 years. I think you won't find in those 92,000 pages any reason, any basis for believing that we're going to be more successful in the next 9 years or 9 months or whatever than we were in the last 9 months. And that's something for the Congress, I think, to consider very strongly before they vote more money for this war.
Peter, is that true? And Peter, do you have concerns about WikiLeaks?
No, I don't. I mean, I think the more information we have about these very important matters, the better. But first of all, Danny Ellsberg did the nation a tremendous service by leaking the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times. But, we're not reliving history in Afghanistan. The North Vietnamese army was 500,000 men strong. It was supported by the Soviet Union, Mao's China. The Taliban is maybe 25,000 fighters on a good day. They're a relatively small insurgency. It's not that it's not that they're so strong. It's the Afghan government and Afghan military are relatively weak. And there are many other differences. 63% of Afghans in a recent poll said they were in favor of the U.S. military. It's a pretty high number for a Muslim country that's been occupied by a group of non-Muslims. And there are so many differences between Vietnam and Afghanistan to sort of say that they're similar. I don't think it's particularly helpful. We're not reliving history all the time. Afghanistan has got its own set of problems, but they're very different. And one final point, in 1968, about 150 American soldiers were dying every day, every 4 days in the war. Too many American soldiers are dying in Afghanistan right now, but about 150 Americans died in an entire year in 2008 during the war. We're looking at very different kinds of conflicts.
All right. Michael Hastings, does the leak put forces at risk, Michael?
I don't think so. I think, WikiLeaks made a smart move by going to the New York Times and the other media outlets who have established reputations with dealing with high-level security issues on things like this. I think one of the most interesting things about this is something that Peter said. Many of these secrets are not really secret. In fact, they confirm a narrative that many journalists and others have been talking about for years. So the question is, well, then why is the secret to begin with? The Afghans know about civilians being killed in Afghanistan. The Pakistanis know about ISI involvement in Afghanistan. The American soldiers on the ground know about civilians killing and the Pakistanis' involvement across the border. So the question is, why is this secret? Who's being kept in the dark? And I think the answer to that is they're trying to keep the American public in the dark about a lot of this stuff.
Daniel, do you understand why Mr. Gibbs, representing the president, is so upset?
Well, he's very upset in part because he's working for a president who has indicted more people now for leaks than all previous presidents put together. And two of those people, Thomas Drake and Shami Leibowitz, have been indicted for acts that were taken under Bush, which George W. Bush administration chose not to indict. So this is an administration that's more concerned about preventing transparency, I would say, than its predecessors, which I'm very sorry to hear as somebody who voted for Obama and expect to vote for him again, despite all this.
Peter.
But, you know, in terms of the, if I may say, in terms of the relation to Vietnam, the crucial thing that I think even these relatively low-level, field-level secret documents compared to the top-secret ones in the Pentagon Papers, what they both reveal is this: why it is that despite the fact that the Taliban is not popular in that country, they get stronger every year as we put more troops in. That's a prospect that I think should give Congress a very great reason for sending more troops over there, which I think in the civilian casualties, in the death squads and everything else, will strengthen the Taliban, not weaken it.
Let me get a break. When I come back, I want to ask Peter and Michael and Daniel, what should be secret? In times of conflict, is anything secret after this?